So one of the helpful ways of really trying to understand what happens to the brain of children who might be really highly activated into that fight or flight mode is to use the hand model by Dan Siegel. So he's done loads of work around trying to really help people understand the neuroscience of brains, of trauma, and of children's behaviour. Really, really helpful. And he's presented this hand model of the brain. So effectively this wrist part is your brain stem, so this is your survival part, and then your feeling, or your limbic system, your feeling part of the brain, wraps around that, so this is your thumb, and then your cortex, which is the last part to develop, wraps all the way around the top, so this is at the front part of your brain. And now what happens is when this part of the brain, this middle part, this feeling part of the brain is activated, so something has freaked you out, you are interpreting something around you as threatening or as dangerous, then this is a physiological response. Your feeling part gets activated, so the fight-flight mechanism kicks in and it effectively flips off the lid of your cortex. So this one's ringing, really, really activated, and the cortex is switched off, which means that reasoning, rationalising, trying to use words and language to calm children down, or adults, when this bit is activated, is just impossible. You know, in the speech and language world, they will talk about the Broca's area, and how the Broca's area, which is responsible for the language of your brain, it switches off, it turns off completely, so you don't even have access to words. So lots of people will say, I was so frightened I couldn't even speak. I can't communicate when I'm really anxious. That's what happens. You don't have access to language. So that's why a key thing for us when we're thinking about how do we help children who are dysregulated, if we want to use those words, who are frightened, who are feeling really in a very anxious, terrified state, is we work on regulating, calming, not rationalising, thinking, planning, or teaching them how to get out of this situation. We wait it out, we focus on calming the body, on regulating the breath, you know, reducing that heart rate, which will be rapid. We work on those things, and then when they're regulated, when this one has settled, the alarm bell's turned off, the cortex will come back on, and then you can do talking and thinking and planning and learning. And that's how we think about the brain development and how we work with it therapeutically. So in terms of expectations of children when they're in this chronic state, so children who've been exposed to lots of adversity, or who might not have received adequate care, we know that their default position is to have this part of the brain almost permanently switched on. It's really scanning all of the time. So their lid flipping process happens so quickly, so much more easily than for a child who hasn't had that experience, because that's what trauma has done to them. What's tricky is that we often expect children to be able to know that they're there, to know that that's happening. You know, if a child could just say to me, I'm feeling a bit funny, I'm feeling a bit scared, I'm feeling like I want to really punch something, then we could do something with it and that'd be really helpful. The annoying thing is that these children can't do that. You know, not a lot of us can do that, but especially when we've been exposed to really early trauma, the modelling of how to interpret what's happening inside of you hasn't been done. So there's not been a lot of opportunity for children to kind of work out, I feel like this because of this, and I need to go and tell somebody so that they can help me with that. That bit's missing. So if you think about the brain as like a wall of the foundations of a house, they have a lot of bricks missing in their wall, which means that when we are trying to encourage children to communicate with us about what's happening for them, you know, lots of schools use those card systems, which in theory is really great and for lots of children will work, but for children who haven't had some of those building blocks slotted into their wall, they don't know how to do it, they can't do it, they won't even know, they won't even be able to sense there's quite a disconnect between what's happening inside of their bodies and what they know is happening and how they're interpreting that. And it won't be their default to be able to reach out to people and say, this is what's happening for me, can you help me with it? Or even to use cards to demonstrate, because they won't have a clue. Lots of the children I see can't tell if they're hungry, they can't tell if they're too hot, if they're too cold, if they're in pain or if they're not. They can't even tell those basic cues because that building block is missing. So the emotional world is even harder for them to communicate.